All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a story of ambition so big, so absolutely massive, that it literally broke a republic that had been around for 500 years. And it's all about one man, Gaius Julius Caesar. I mean, just imagine you're a Roman senator back in 44 BC. You're faced with this terrifying question. This one guy, Caesar, he's just won a massive civil war. He has basically all the power. The army loves him, the people love him, he's just unstoppable. So what do you do? What can you do?
Well, for the Senate, the answer was brutal: 23 stab wounds. And you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? But no, this was just the beginning, the explosive start to the end of the entire Roman Republic.
Okay, so this is the big puzzle, isn't it? How did it all come to this? How does one guy's life and his death end up toppling a government that had stood for half a millennium? Well, to figure that out, we can't start at the end. We've got to go back to the beginning, to his rise. So Caesar wasn't exactly a nobody. He was born into an old aristocratic family, the Julii. They even claimed they were descended from the goddess Venus herself. Pretty fancy, right? But here's the thing. For all their history, they weren't really at the top of the political food chain in Rome. So Caesar knew he had to climb, and man was he good at climbing. And here's how he did it. He played the game, you know? He followed the standard Roman career path. They called it the cursus honorum, which is basically the path of honors. Think of it like a political ladder. And he didn't just climb it, he aced every single step. He got his military cred, even won the civic crown, which is a huge deal for bravery. Then he gets himself elected Pontifex Maximus. That's the head priest of Rome, a job for life. He becomes a praetor, a top judge. And then, bam, he hits the big time. Consul, the highest office in the land. Every single step was calculated to build his power and his connections. But even being consul wasn't enough. His enemies in the Senate were blocking him at every turn. So what does he do? He pulls a move that was totally unheard of. He creates what we now call the First Triumvirate. It's basically an informal alliance, a backroom deal with the two other most powerful guys in town. Pompey, who was this legendary general, and Crassus, who was ridiculously wealthy. This wasn't an official government position. It was three guys getting together and deciding, hey, let's run this town, completely bypassing the Senate. After his year as consul, Caesar gets a new gig as a provincial governor. And this is the moment everything changes. This is where Caesar, the slick politician, becomes Caesar, the living legend. This is where he builds a power base so huge it would one day challenge Rome itself. Just look at what he accomplished in Gaul. I mean, the scale of this is mind-blowing. In just 8 years, he conquers pretty much all of modern-day France and Belgium. He does stuff no Roman had ever dared to do before. He invades the mysterious island of Britain. He builds a bridge across the Rhine just to show the Germans he could. He gets insanely rich off of it. But the most important thing, he builds an army. A tough, veteran army that was loyal to him. Not to Rome, not to the Senate, to Julius Caesar. That was his real power. So while all this is happening, back in Rome, people are starting to get nervous. His old buddy Pompey, he's now working with Caesar's enemies in the Senate. They see this guy out in Gaul with his giant loyal army, and they are terrified. That old triumvirate, it's completely dead. You could just feel it in the air. A showdown was coming. And then the Senate makes its move. They send him a message, an ultimatum really. Disband your army, give up your command, and come back to Rome as a regular citizen. But Caesar wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what this was, a trap. The second he gave up his army, he'd lose his legal immunity. His enemies would drag him through the courts and politically destroy him. He was totally backed into a corner. So in January 49 BC, he had to make a choice, and he did. He took one of his legions and he marched it across a small river called the Rubicon. Now that river was the legal boundary of Italy. To cross it with an army was an act of treason. It meant one thing and one thing only: civil war. And as he did it, he supposedly said those famous words, Alea iacta est, the die is cast. No turning back now. The civil war that followed was, well, it was fast and it was brutal. Caesar hunted Pompey clear across the Mediterranean, finally beating him. He mopped up the rest of his enemies in Africa and Spain. By the time he came back to Rome, there was no question. He was the one and only master of the Roman world. You know that famous quote, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered? He reportedly sent that message back to Rome after a ridiculously quick victory in what's now Turkey.
And it just perfectly sums up the guy's style. He was fast, he was decisive, he was a genius on the battlefield. So the big question is, now that he has all this power, what's he going to do with it?
Well, he got right to work. He started a whole series of reforms. Some of them were super practical and actually really popular. He fixed the Roman calendar, which was a total mess, and created the Julian calendar. Yep, the one our modern calendar's based on. He gave land to his soldiers, gave out Roman citizenship to more people in the provinces, basically trying to bring more people into the fold.
But then came the honors. And this is where things get really dicey. See, if there's one thing Romans absolutely hated, it was the idea of a king. And Caesar starts accepting honors that they look a lot like things a king would get. He was the first living Roman to have his face put on a coin. He gets a golden chair in the Senate. They even rename a month after him, Julius for July. And then comes the big one. They declare him Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. For his opponents, this was it. This was the proof they needed. He was trying to become a king.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, the Ides of March. That fear, that absolute terror of a new king in Rome, it just boiled over. A group of senators decided they had to act. And in their minds, they weren't murderers. Oh no, they were liberators. They were heroes, saving the Republic from a tyrant. So on the Ides of March, that's March 15th, 44 BC, they made their move. A whole group of them, about 60 senators, cornered him right there in the Senate. And get this, some of them were guys Caesar had forgiven, guys he'd given jobs to. They surrounded him and they stabbed him 23 times. He died right there at the base of a statue of his old enemy, Pompey. And here is the ultimate bitter irony of the whole story. The assassins said they did it to save the Republic. But what did their actions actually accomplish? They unleashed absolute chaos. Another brutal civil war, this one lasting 13 years. By the time the dust settled, every single one of the assassins was dead. And who was in charge? Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. The Republic they supposedly died to save was gone for good. In its place was the Roman Empire. And the very first emperor? Caesar's heir. So it leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? Did the assassins save the Republic? Or did they just speed up its death? Was what they did a noble act to kill a tyrant that just went wrong? Or was the Republic already on its last legs, and the Ides of March was just the final bloody death rattle of a system that couldn't handle a man like Julius Caesar? It's really something to chew on.